boys and girls, and welcome to this episode of The Invisible Critic. I am your host, The Invisible Critic from North New Jersey, and this is the sub-series, The Forbidden History of the Globalist Conspiracy. And today we're going to talk about this guy, Andrew the Great, Andrew Jackson. He's a great American hero, and he struck a mighty blow against these New World Order bankers. He was the one who killed the Second Central Bank, which was Rothschild's wholly owned bank of the United States. Now, ever since he was a little boy, he was a fighter, okay? And he hated the British during the American Revolution. He didn't fight in the revolution, but he helped out. He was only 12 years old, and his brother was 16 years old, and he was captured, and he was once cut by a British officer, asked him to shine his boots. And young Andrew Jackson told him where to get off, and he got slashed, and it just left an impression on him. He always hated British tyranny, and he always hated big banks. He was Scottish-Irish. His parents were Scottish-Irish, and they're known as feisty fighters, the fighting Irish. Now, we fast forward a bit. 1797, he went on, he became a lawyer. He was congressman for one term. He was appointed senator from Tennessee. And... But, he didn't last long. He was only there a year or two. The capital was in Philadelphia back then. He just hated the corruption. Early on, he saw the politics that was going on. But he was associated with what became known as the Democratic Republican Party of Jefferson and Madison. They hated big government. They hated the big banks. They were anti-British. So that's where his politics was going. 1802, he is elected Major General of the Tennessee Militia. And that was a big deal back then, because back then, whenever they had trouble with the Indians, and it was always the British, well, most of the time they would stir up the Indians, you called out the militia. So the militia was like the state's military. He was a major general, so that was a big position. 1805, he entertains Aaron Burr at his estate, the Hermitage, down in Tennessee. And Aaron Burr, you recall, was the man who shot that son of a bitch, Alexander Hamilton, who founded the first central bank of the United States. So they were of like mind, Burr and Jefferson and Jackson and Madison, because Jackson is kind of the next generation coming up. Now you had the War of 1812, which we talked about in an earlier episode. I'm not going to get into that, but as you recall, he was the great hero of the Battle of New Orleans, 1815. And that's what made him a nationally known figure. And it is from his achievement at that battle, the great victory, that he is able to launch his presidential campaign later on. But before that, again, we covered this in an earlier episode. You got to go in order with this shit. You can't jump around. You got to watch all the episodes from 1 up till now, because I'm not going to repeat myself. But I am going to repeat myself a little bit here. The central bank caused the crash of 1819. And this personally affected Andrew Jackson, and he also saw how it hurt the country folk. This Second Central Bank, Rothschild's bank, same story, same shit every time. You expand the money supply, you contract the money supply, everything crashes, and then they buy everything up cheap. Hated the banks. And that is what prompted him to run for president in 1824, because the bank's second charter would have come up for renewal in 1836. So he was hoping to, become president and fight these bankers. In 1824, he wins the plurality, not the majority, but he gets more votes than any other candidate. He gets more electoral votes than any other candidate. Second place was John Quincy Adams, but because it wasn't an absolute majority, Adams made a dirty deal with Henry Clay, who was an agent of the bankers. Clay later became Secretary of State because he gave all of his electoral votes to Adams. And that became known as the corrupt bargain. So Andrew Jackson was cheated out of the election in 1824. He comes back in 1828. And it is the dirtiest election in American history. You thought Hillary versus Trump was bad. That was nothing. These bankers and their tools and their agents, their puppets, and they had fake news back then too. They was attacking Jackson. They said his wife was a whore, that she married Jackson while she was still married to another guy. They said Jackson's mother had been a prostitute. They said Jackson used to kill Indians and eat their bodies. There's all in the fake news. This is a fake news article. It shows Jackson stabbing a guy who was bending over. They got into an argument. The guy bent over. It's all lies. But they had to stop him. They threw everything at him, but he still got elected. Very close election. In the interim, between the election and the inauguration, Jackson's wife, beloved wife Rachel, she dies. And Jackson blamed his political enemies on her death because she was stressed out. Her heart gave out. Because back then, you call a woman a whore like that, it just ate her up. She couldn't take it no more. And he never forgave them. And he always maintained that they killed her with all of their dirty attacks. Now he's president, and right away, traitors in his own government and his vice president, because he didn't run as a ticket back then. Whoever got the second most votes could be vice president. You ran for vice president. His vice president was Calhoun, and Calhoun's wife and a bunch of other cabinet wives, they start a big controversy called the Petticoat Affair. Well, they were saying that one of Jackson's Secretary of War, they're saying that his wife, she was a whore too, that her ex-husband had died, and right away she got married to the new husband. It was a disgrace. You know, morals was different back then. But this Jackson stuck by his guy. But this is the kind of attacks that was going on. They couldn't stop him getting elected, so now they want to tear him down with these phony scandals. This is the son of a bitch. This is the architect right here, okay? Nicholas Biddle. He's basically the second coming of Alexander Hamilton. He's the president of the Second Central Bank located in Philadelphia. This bank, the guy owns newspapers. He owns politicians. Probably the most powerful guy in America at that time. He's an agent of the Rothschilds, for sure. A lot of the shares of the Second Central Bank were held by foreigners in London. And now he wants the bank, he wants an early rechartering of the bank. He doesn't want to wait till 1836 because that could be Jackson's second term. He'll be too strong then. He wants to do it now, early. So he goes they vote for a recharter, but Jackson vetoes it. This came to be known as the Bank War. That's a cartoon from the period. Shows Jackson doing battle with a many-headed snake monster. It's got Biddle and it's got all these big bankers in there. And in his message after he vetoed the bill, I'm going to read you an excerpt. He says, "Is there no danger to our liberty and independence in a bank that by its nature has so little to bind it to our country? Is there no cause to tremble for the purity of our elections in peace and for the independence of our country in war, controlling our currency, receiving our public monies, and holding thousands of our citizens in dependence is more dangerous than a naval and military power of the enemy." And that was it. Now, the bank still had 4 years to go before its charter expired, but he killed the charter. So now, what do? Biddle puts up his boy, Senator Clay, to run against Jackson in 1832. Biddle owned Clay completely, but Jackson wins in a landslide. Okay, but Biddle and his boys, they don't give up. These are some of Biddle's puppets in the Senate. Senator Daniel Webster, Senator Henry Clay, Senator Calhoun. Okay, so they're still working against Jackson. In 1834, they censured. This is the only time this ever happened. They censured the president. It's sort of like an impeachment, but not quite. It's just an official display of our displeasure, and we're displeased with you. And this cartoon of the period shows John Clay sewing Jackson's mouth shut. So they're still trying to take him down. But now Biddle. Here's Biddle and his boss back in London, Rothschild. Now they really got to start playing hardball. And this is what I'm about to tell you. This is establishment history. This is known. This is, nobody even disputes it. Even the Jackson-hating historians who they say, they admit this is what happened. Biddle deliberately sabotaged the economy. And he said he was going to do that by contracting the money supply because he wanted to make life so miserable that people would turn against Jackson. He can get a Second Central Bank back. But it totally backfired because even some of the supporters of the bank were like, hey, wait, this is too much. And they turned against Biddle, and that was his downfall. He was ruined. But it's a fact. They tried to deliberately crash the economy in order to stick it up Jackson's ass. Year after that, 1835, you see that? Zero. Only time in American history the national debt was paid down to zero. He paid off all the old war debts from the war. Everything that accumulated all these years down to zero. And he did that. He slashed the government workforce by like 20%. Oh, this was a great American. But the big banks, they can't have that. They make money on that, especially government debt. Here you got a guy, he's killing the central bank. He's paying off the national debt. What are they going to do? They can't censure him. They can't get him out of office. So what happens? 3 weeks after that, lone gunman walks up to Andrew Jackson with 2 revolvers. They both misfire. How convenient that after all this happened, that this lone gunman, who happened to be an Englishman, by the way, takes 2 shots at Jackson. Jackson takes his cane and he beats his ass. He was still a fighter, even as an old man. But that was it. 1936 comes, the bank is dead. This cartoon depicts Jackson blowing up the bank, and it shows the devil blowing up, and Biddle, and Clay, and Calhoun, and all those guys. And that was the end of the bank. And it did not come back till 1913. So he bought us like 70, 80 years' time. Now, I want to go off script a little bit. Because when people hear the name Andrew Jackson, they talk about the phony Trail of Tears. Now, I got an article linked down below. It's a myth that Jackson was brutal to the Indians. The Trail of Tears was a buyout deal. They got money. They got negotiated. The Cherokees relocated out to Oklahoma, and they're still there as the Cherokee Nation. Total bullshit. The death toll is exaggerated. The circumstances are exaggerated. I mean, they got paid good money. You got to read. I link it down below. Jackson actually adopted an Indian child and raised him as his son. Did you know that? Oh, he's such a racist. But now in 1830s, 1840s, the presidents who followed Andrew Jackson, Van Buren, Harrison, Tyler, Polk, all of them faced intense pressure to bring back the bank. But because of the damage that Jackson had done to the reputation of the bankers, these presidents, even though they weren't as strong as Jackson, they were able to resist that because Jackson helped to educate the people about what the bank was all about. So really, Jackson's legacy is he saved us from this monstrous counterfeiting operation for like 70, 80 years. It wasn't until 1913. Here's your homework assignment. 1837, Jackson's farewell address. I linked it down below. It's an amazing document. You got to read it. It's so educational. Oh, what a great man. But that is why they're trying to take him off the $20 bill. And they want to replace him with Aunt Jemima. I mean, Harriet Tubman, whoever the hell that is. Okay? And Trump is resisting this, but his own Treasury Secretary is saying, well, after Trump is out, Jackson will be gone, and you'll have Harriet Tubman, who was a black Union spy, on the $20 bill coming out of your ATMs. Ridiculous. But Jackson happens to be Trump's favorite president. He's got a portrait of him in the Oval Office. He's visited his tomb. And in many ways, there's a lot of parallels. He's battling these deep staters and these central bankers. And, you understand why there's this constant scandal mongering against Trump, just like there was against Jackson. I'm not saying Trump is Jackson. No way. But there is a parallel there. And you see the common thread running through history. You go against the central bank, and they come after you. So, anyway, that concludes this episode. And once again, I want to remind you, you need to get this book. I got a link down below. Andrew the Great by M.S. King. It's an amazing read. Okay? So, till next time, this is your host, the Invisible Critic. And next time, we're going to go back to Europe. We're going to look at the 1840s. Big decade. A lot of shit going on with this New World Order stuff. But until then, this is Invisible Critic signing off.